So, what even is menopause? Today, we're going to cover what menopause actually is, the phases of menopause, the biological and hormonal changes happening inside our bodies. And unfortunately, when it comes to menopause education, it's severely lacking. More than 50% of women have never even heard of the word perimenopause before. So, when it comes to having questions about menopause, I want to highlight there is no silly question. And if a question does come to mind, I want to encourage you to reach out to our Facebook community group to seek the answers you deserve. So let's go ahead and start from the ground up, beginning with what even is menopause? So, menopause is a natural biological process that marks the end of a woman's menstrual cycle. It is officially diagnosed after 12 consecutive months without a period and typically occurs between the ages of 45 and 51, though the age range can vary. And it is important to note that if you have no period for 6 months and then you have a menstrual cycle, that means that 12 consecutive months without having a period to be diagnosed as menopausal starts all over again. I know it kind of sucks. All right, so important to note though that menopause symptoms can begin in our early 30s or late 30s. So even though the menopause being marked as menopausal, meaning the end of our period, happens in our mid to late 40s, the start of these menopausal symptoms can even happen a decade earlier. And many women experience these symptoms, but the reality is when they come to their doctor or GP asking, hey, what's going on? They unfortunately are dismissed because when blood markers are taken, the blood markers show that everything looks normal. And when it comes to the diagnosis of menopause, there is no blood test that can accurately define you as being in the perimenopausal transition. We actually use a resource in the Australasian Menopausal Society. They provide it, which is a scoring card that uses symptoms to identify if you are going through the perimenopausal transition. And this is the reality of why so many women are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed during this transition. So to go ahead and really understand perimenopause, we're going to look at the phases. And looking at the stages of menopause, we want to start off with premenopause, which is the stage that girls go ahead and move from childhood to puberty, and they experience the onset of the menstrual cycle. From there, we enter into perimenopause, which marks the onset transition to menopause, and it typically lasts several years, as mentioned. And during this phase, women can observe a disruption of symptoms as well as a disruptive menstrual cycle. And they will see signs of like hormonal fluctuation and issues like hot flushes, night sweats, brain fog, and there's like 60 other symptoms that we'll discuss in future units. But while pregnancy is still possible during this time, the likelihood of getting pregnant during perimenopause drops significantly. And then once we've gone through the perimenopausal transition and we've gone 12 months without a period, we finally enter into menopause. And menopause itself is actually just one single day. That is the day after you've gone through a full year without your period. And after that day, we are marked as postmenopausal. This is the stage of life that happens for the rest of your life. And when it comes to symptoms, I think people kind of associate postmenopause as being devoid of menopausal symptoms. But the reality is, symptoms during menopause can last up to 20 years after our last period. And as a menopause specialist, I really want to highlight that dealing with symptoms for up to 20 years is completely unnecessary suffering. And I'll show you exactly how to eliminate these symptoms for once and for all in my personalized program. So, when does menopause happen? For women going through natural menopause, and what I mean by natural, that is without surgery or medical intervention, menopause typically happens between the ages of 45 and 51. However, However, lifestyle factors like smoking can accelerate menopause by up to 9 years. And I think for some women, the thought of having no period and being devoid of one, and making that come earlier could be tempting. But the reality is that when we are going through our menstrual cycle, we are going through fluctuation of different hormones like estrogen that actually is really protective for the body. And that slow, healthy decline is what we're looking for versus having an accelerated menopause, which can leave us being more fragile and frail within our more vulnerable years. So we want to maintain a healthy period for as long as possible. Before menopause, obviously comes perimenopause. And this is where symptoms can start, and they can begin up to 5 to 10 years prior to menopause. And during perimenopause, there is a slow regulation down of different hormones. This is generally where women experience their most intense symptoms, is during this perimenopausal phase. And after we go through perimenopause and menopause, then we enter postmenopause, which stays with us the rest of our life. So to go ahead and go a little bit deeper, I want to share with you the different types of menopause. Even though natural menopause is what most women will go through, which is a gradual decline in sex hormones over time, there are other types of menopause that can be much more quick onset and very shocking, which is surgical menopause. And this occurs when ovaries are removed, and it triggers an instant menopause, which can be far more intense in symptoms, as well as medical menopause. And this could be caused by treatments like chemotherapy, which can damage the ovaries and induce menopause. And regardless of how menopause happens and the intensity of these symptoms, I want to highlight and emphasize the treatment approach remains the same when using natural methods. So this is great news. Women going through surgical or medical menopause and they're dealing with really intense symptoms, the natural methods remain the same. So moving on into a few common myths and misinformation during the menopausal experience, we're going to go ahead and talk about 5 of these myths and bust them now. So you have some informed information to make decisions as you go into the menopause transition. So number 1, blood work can diagnose menopause. And the reality is, as we kind of already mentioned, it cannot. When it comes to blood test, it is not a reliable diagnostic tool for menopause, and it is not recommended for GPs or gynecologists or menopause specialists like myself to use blood testing as a sole tool to diagnose if you are in peri or in just entering into menopause. When it comes to blood testing, though, blood testing can be incredibly beneficial when it comes to identifying different issues like thyroid imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, electrolyte imbalances, which we will address in our coaching. But if you have been dismissed by a healthcare provider because they've seen your blood work and they say it looks normal, the reality is hormones fluctuate rapidly during the perimenopause transition. And the gold standard of diagnosis is going to be a symptom questionnaire. And that is what we go through during our one-on-one free consultation, which is recognized by the Australian and Asian Menopause Society to help you identify if you are going through this perimenopausal or menopausal transition. All right. So the next myth that we're going to bust is weight gain, and the fact that weight gain during menopause is due to a slow metabolism. There is this common thought that our metabolism is to blame when we experience menopausal weight gain, but the research shows that metabolism actually remains stable from the age of 20 to 65. And the real culprit of our extra weight gain, or as some people call menobelly, is hormonal shifts. And this actually changes the distribution of fat where we accumulate our weight during menopause. So as we are in our premenopausal years, weight generally is distributed around our hips and glutes, which helps support things like having conception and birth in the future. But as we go through menopause and our hormones shift down, we see fat accumulation happening around our midsection. And this uptake of fat is actually called visceral fat. which is linked to many chronic diseases. So it is really important to make sure that we are maintaining our weight during menopause and not using a slowed down metabolism as the key reason why. It's actually different issues like hormonal fluctuations. And during this course, you'll learn about 4 of the common reasons we experience such intense menopause symptoms like inflammation, cortisol issues, gut health, and those actually contribute the most significantly to this weight gain. So, coming into our next myth that we're going to be busting is this dependence and reliance on estrogen rich foods. And while estrogen rich foods like flax seeds, soy, sesame seeds, they can be really beneficial, the actual impact on replacing lost estrogen with these estrogen rich foods is quite minimal compared to other food sources that I would highly recommend to help balance and create more diversity, because our gut microbiome actually becomes less diverse during this time, exacerbating menopause symptoms to actively support hormonal health. Looking at our 4th menopause myth we're going to bust is the fact that fasting is the best approach for weight loss. So when it comes to fasting, fasting has become a very hot topic during menopause, but the reality is it's not a magic bullet solution for everyone. Some women can thrive on intermittent fasting, while others can find it really stress inducing and worsens their symptoms. So we kind of investigate for you genetics, lifestyle, individual metabolic responses that all play a role in how our body actually responds to fasting, and will help you identify what type of dietary plan is going to work best for you. And the final myth we're going to bust is the fact that symptoms just go away on their own. And this would be incredibly wonderful, but the reality is that menopause symptoms just don't magically disappear. If they're left unmanaged or untreated, they can persist for decades. Symptoms like hot flushes, joint pain, brain fog, mood swings, they don't fade away for everyone. But the good news is you don't have to suffer. Through my targeted approach, my clients see up to a 90% reduction in their menopause symptoms within 8 to 10 weeks of my personalized protocol and course. This isn't about just trying to wait out these symptoms and hoping something gets better. It's about taking action now so you can feel better, faster, and have a strong, healthy life. So this is an overview of what menopause is, and we're going to go ahead and check in our next guide some continuation on how to treat some of these symptoms.